lot to talk about with you. So first, give us your background as a kid, where you grew up, and how you wound up at Powell Memorial Academy.
Well, first I want to say, hey, everybody, how's everybody doing? I hope you're doing well. I know it's crazy time of year and crazy time of our history, but I hope everybody's doing great. I'm so happy to do this. This is awesome. I'm so looking forward so much for this time. So anyway, so I'm sorry, what was the question?
The question is, what neighborhood did you grow up in? What parish? How did you wind up at Powell Memorial Academy?
I grew up in downtown Brooklyn in the Fort Greene housing projects. And I went to St. James Parish, and from kindergarten up into 8th grade, I was in Catholic school. When I got to 8th grade, I was an aspiring actor. I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be in the entertainment industry, and so I auditioned for the High School Performing Arts. That didn't go so well. I didn't make the cut, and so I was going to go to the high school that I was supposed to go to was the high school that my older brother went to, Tim, which was Most Holy Trinity High School. He actually was an outstanding runner there and did really well, even though he only ran for a year and a half. And but he became an outstanding runner and got a scholarship to college. So I was designated to go to that high school. But unfortunately, that high school closed down. And so the next school I was supposed to go to was Laughlin, Archbishop Laughlin. And because that was in my neighborhood. But the problem with that, being in my neighborhood, is that I grew up in an environment that was very, very hostile to me, and I got bullied a lot. And so my thinking was that if I went to that high school, in where my neighborhood was, which was Laughlin High School, that I would be doomed to whatever system that basically had regulated me to, as far as putting me in the box of this is who he is. So I realized that I had to get out, and so my mother took me to Powell Memorial Academy. And I'm not really sure how I ended up at Powell Memorial Academy, though I did find out later, which I'll tell you about later. But anyway, so she took me to Powell Memorial Academy. I had really poor grades coming out of grade school. So my grades didn't cut the grade, so to speak, at Power. And so she took me there and begged the principal to let me go there. She told him I would study hard, I'd work really hard. And as it was, I was a really hard studier and really hard worker. But unbeknownst to me, they didn't know about these things back then, but I had a learning disability. I had no idea I didn't have it until actually maybe about 12, 15 years ago that I discovered that I had a learning disability. But anyway, so I got there, they allowed me to come to school. I was totally thrilled. When I got there, I was a kid who had very low self-esteem. As I mentioned, I was bullied a lot, so I had all that stuff going on. And so when I got there and I started running, it just took off. And I did very well my freshman year. I won every race my freshman year in cross country, except for the city championships. I lost to this kid named Jim Shields. And that actually would in retrospect, that would be the turning point for me, because I was devastated. I was unconsolable. In fact, we won, our team won, the freshman team won the city championships, but I was unconsolable. But I had vowed that he would never, ever beat me ever again. And he never did. Through the next 4 years, he never beat me. As it turned out, he actually decided to go an upper distance. I stayed with the 1.5 mile, and he stayed with the upper distance. And his senior year, he was no slouch himself, and he actually set the national record in the steeplechase our senior year. So that's how I got into Power. Now the backstory, though, here's another backstory here, is that Don Buckley, who was the coach at Most Holy Trinity, contacted Brother Beelan and told him that he had a runner there, Tim Weaver, that had a brother that was that could possibly be a good runner. And I hadn't run anything. I didn't run before that, so I don't know how they knew that. But anyway, I love to run. My older brother knew I loved to run. I would run around the neighborhood all the time. Probably mostly I run away from people who wouldn't beat me up. But that's another story. But anyway, to make a long story short, so apparently Don Buckley called Brother Beelan and said, "Hey, you need to take this kid in because he may be a good runner." And so that's really how I actually ended up at Power, apparently, and unbeknownst to me. So I got to Power, and that's how I got there.
So Maurice, I'm going to read a few things you accomplished in high school. I want you to talk about whatever you want to talk about. And I also want to know, and everybody else, who are your greatest influences? I will tell you that I read an interview that Brother Beelan gave many years ago where they actually asked him, so who was the best runner you ever had at Power? And of course, Brother Beelan, being intelligent, said, I can't name one. And actually, some of the hardest workers weren't that good runners. But when he named names, of course, he named Tony Colon, Matt Centrowitz, he named you, he named the Lovett brothers, and a few other guys I can't remember. Paul Barbary's older brother, I think it was John Barbary, but I'm not sure. But there were like 7 or 8 guys, and you and Matt, of course, were included, along with Tony Colon, who I knew. But I just want to read a few races that you won, but then I want you to talk about your favorites, the highlights, and who, influenced you the most, championships. As a junior, you won the same mile to help Power win its first title at the CHSAA Outdoor City Championships. As a senior, you broke the New York State and national flat floor record for the indoor 2-mile run in 9:04. And at the Penn Relays, you anchored the Power team to victory in the Championship of America Distance Medley Relay, earning Power their #1 ranking in the country. So I took one from each of your years, sophomore, junior, senior, but I want to know what you remember and what you want to tell us about. And again, who influenced you the most in your running career through high school?
That's a great question. The interesting thing is my sophomore year, I won the mile at the, as you mentioned, the CHSA championships, but that is not my most memorable experience that year. My most memorable experience that year was, well, it was 2 of them. One was being on the cross country team as a sophomore. And the reason why that is so significant for me is because that's when I first really understood the idea of brotherhood and team and a sense of belonging. Like I said, I was a kid who was bullied, and I came out of grade school, have a low self-esteem, didn't think I was that bright, and anyway, to make a long story short, when I got to my sophomore year and had people like Brian Johnston and Art Stober and Ed Jennings and all these guys were just basically kind of like big brothers to me. And they were hard on me. They weren't easy on me when I say that. But as the season went along, we were doing really well actually at cross country. We were actually undefeated up until Eastern States. And we thought when we were going into Eastern States, we thought we had an opportunity to win Eastern States championships, and we all did. None of us did well. We all ran crappy, and but this is where I think this is what the change was for us as a team, is that we went back to the drawing board and we worked our tail off. And there's this in Central Park, there's this big hill, it's called Pilgrim Hill. And we would run up the hill and run down the hill, and we just did about 30 times. And this was right after after the loss, we did this, and we were running up and down, and people were standing up, stopping over and puking because, and Steve Hurley remembers this, I'm sure, but people would turn over and they'd be puking, and somebody would grab somebody by the drawers and pull them up and say, "Get up," and we were just pushing each other to the place to exhaustion. And we all went home, and we were just so exhausted. But that whole week we trained like the Dickens, and then we won city championships right after that. And and we won by a landslide. I think we had like 25 points. And in cross country, you count by how many you get five men count as far as the overall totals. And so we had 3 people in the top 10, which was unbelievable. And we had Kevin Muchner and I can't remember, Frank Rafferty, I believe, that were the other 3 and 4. So Art Silber, myself, Brian Johnston, Frank Rafferty, and Kevin Muchner. So I say all that to say is that those guys were just like, I just love them to death just because we were so close, and we created such a bond that I think propelled us to being the team that we became. And then later that spring, we ran the Penn Relays, and this is my first time running in the Penn Relays as a sophomore, and we were 3rd ranked in the country at the time in the distant medley relay. But at Penn Relays, there was also a team called Memphis High School out of Long Island. Memphis High School had the fastest runner in the country. His name is Mark Belger. And this guy was, he was like a 4:13, 4:12 miler. And he was just unbelievable. He was, I think he won the Millrose Mile, I think. I'm not sure. I think he did that indoor season. And the Millrose Mile is like the championship mile race where they attract all the top runners on the East Coast to run in this race. And either he or Gene McCarthy won. I can't remember now. But anyway, he was unbelievable. So he's running anchor on this relay at Penn Relays. And we were favored to be in the mix, but never to win. And Mark Belger is in the race. So Brian Johnston runs anchor. Jerry Shentowitz leads off. He hands us, off in about 8th or 7th place, whatever. Greg Little takes 2nd place. He tears the track up. This is at Penn Relays, and he just flies around the track. He's a quarter miler. He blows the race up, and brings it to. Hands it to me in 4th place. And what Brother Beelan told me to do is basically stay right behind the runners. Just stay there. And as a sophomore, I did whatever Brother Beelan told me to do. I had a conversation with him right before I got into my sophomore year, and he basically sat me down and he said, he was getting ready to take Matt out to the Golden West, and he basically sat me down and he said, if you do what I tell you to do, by the time you're a senior, I will have you running about as fast as Matt. And so to answer your question, who did I look up to? I looked up to Matt, because that's who I wanted to become. That's how fast I wanted to run. And so I thought about that when I was running my 3rd leg at the Penn Relays. I got the stick behind the guy who got 2nd in cross country, and another kid both of them were both seniors, and they were unbelievable runners. And I just got right behind them, and I stayed right behind them, and I handed the stick off to Ryan in about 3rd place. And so we didn't lose anything, we didn't gain anything. But Mark Belger and Memphis were about 50 yards behind, because the guy who ran my leg didn't do very well on that team. And so Mark Belger, the best runner in the country, got the stick like 50 yards behind. So Brian and Malloy, and I think it was Farrell, Archbishop Farrell, and Archbishop Malloy, and Power, they were all running together. And then Lachlan, there was a kid from Lachlan too. So they were all running together, and they basically stayed together for the first 3 laps. But Mark Belger was coming on, and you can hear the crowd knowing that he was coming down and charging down after these guys. And after every lap, he would gain about 20 yards. By the time it was the last lap, he had caught the pack. And so now he's with everybody. And I'm on the infield, and I'm looking at this, and I'm like, okay, well, we know what's going to happen. The best runner in the country is going to win this race. So they're going around the track, and they get to the backstretch, and Brian and the kid from Malloy and Mark Belger, they're all like running together. And Mark Belger's not running away from them. And finally, they come around the turn. Now, Mark Belger was a half miler, and he was fast. He was unbelievably fast. And so we knew that if he was anywhere near the finish line or near the front, coming down the straightaway, he was going to win the race. Well, anyway, he comes tearing down the straightaway, and the crowd's going wild, and he's inching up, and all of a sudden, Brian Johnston, DJ, starts coming up closer to him, closer to him, closer to him. And before you know it, you get to the finish line and Brian's raising his arms. I'm like, what? And anyway, so Brian wins the race for power. And I'm like crazy. I had my head on Brother Beelan's shoulder, and I'm crying, and I'm telling Brian's patting me, and he said, it's gonna be okay, it's gonna be okay. But the point of that is that the idea of team, and you mentioned me winning the CSA championship. My individual accomplishments outweighed, the other way around. The team aspect of what we did and team races that we had outweighed any individual accomplishments I ever had throughout my freshman year through my senior year. And that's probably a highlight of that particular year. So that race wasn't as important to me as it was running that relay and watching Brian take down the top runner in the country and us winning the Penn relays. So I can be so long-winded. Sorry about that.
No, it's not long-winded. That's why we're here. We love hearing this. Did you want to tell me anything else about your junior year and senior year? And of course, I assume, in addition to looking up to Matt Centrowitz, I assume Brother Beelan was a huge factor in your running career, if not your entire life. If you want to talk about him a little bit. And if I could, Maurice, if I could say one other thing. So I spoke to John Sullivan about you and Matt. John Sullivan, Power Grad, I'm sure you know. And he told me that you were, quote, the ultimate competitor, close quote. And then I said, well, tell me something about Maurice. And he said, well, here's what I can tell you about Maurice. He didn't lose a lot of races, but when he did lose, we all knew we were going to be practicing harder the next day, the next week at practice. And sometimes when you lose, John Sullivan said he was like, oh my goodness, when we go back to school on Monday, we're going to be working even harder. But of course, it was out of total respect for you, because you probably know he looked up to you, but he had only great things to say. But give me the rest of your power career and maybe Brother Beelan's effect on you and anybody else who had an effect on you.
Well, Sully definitely had an effect on me, and he's absolutely right. I will not deny that. That is, I was one of those kids that was an extreme competitor, and I hated losing more tun I loved winning. And I did not like losing. I didn't lose very well. I wasn't a good, not to say I wasn't an ungracious loser, but I did not like losing. And anyway, so yes, he's correct exactly on that. But as far as and speaking about people who are just unbelievable, like tenacious runners, John Sullivan was one of those guys too. I mean, he was just as extreme as a competitor as I was. And so I think he probably pushed me a lot in workouts as well. So he may be being a little modest himself, but and I love Sully, as I love all these guys. As far as my junior to senior year, it was really tumultuous going my junior to senior year. My father was an alcoholic, and we had a very disruptive family life when my junior year came around. It was actually an interesting, well, not interesting, but it was a time. What happened was it was New York relays my junior year. I had just won the mile at the championship mile, New York relays mile. And the next day, we won the distance medley relay, and I anchored that. And it was an unbelievable weekend. So my time at the time vaulted me to one of the top runners in the country. So that was like a breakthrough for me. That weekend was a breakthrough weekend for me. The same weekend, my father came to that race, and he was inebriated and a real embarrassment. And I was just totally, I was aghast, just that he would come up and be like that at my most, at the highest, my highest moment in my life. Unfortunately, as I said, my father was an alcoholic, but he's also a very violent man. And an event happened the next day that we had to leave the house, and we thought our lives were in danger. And so I took my younger brother, my younger sister, and my mother, and we spent the night in a hotel. The next morning, I got up and standing on a street corner in downtown Brooklyn and wondering what was going to happen to my life. And I had so much aspirations after that weekend, thinking I can get a college scholarship, I can get out of this horrible family situation that I had. And I was so looking forward to what was the next chapter of my life. And I'm standing on a street corner thinking I'm going to have to drop out of school so I can take care of my younger brother, younger sister, and my mother, because she was just, she was almost comatose at the time. And I stood there and I thought to myself, what am I going to do? And the only thing I can think of was calling Brother Beelan. And so I called Brother Beelan. If I get emotional here, it's because, anyway, I called Brother Beelan and I told him what was going on. And he told me, what he said to me was, Maurice, it's going to be okay. It'll be okay. He said, you know, I'll find a place for you. I'll take, you know, you'll be okay. Don't worry about it. And everything's gonna be okay. He was right. He took care of that. He put me up in a place in New Jersey. So I lived in New Jersey. He basically changed the trajectory of my life that moment, because I literally thought I was going to have to drop out of school and take care of my mother and my younger brother and sister. And because of Brother Beelan, I didn't have to. And because of the strength of the brotherhood that we had with Sully and Kevin Mushner and all the other guys that are on the track team that kind of knew somewhat what I was going, because I actually would stay over at Sully's house from time to time when things got really bad at my house. So they knew what was going on with me as far as my life and my family life was concerned. And Brother Beelan was that shining light on the hill for me. And he guided me out of that horrible situation. And I got to my senior year. At the end of my junior year, I was undefeated my junior year in the mile. Somehow I was able to pull it together, and I was able to run some races. Unfortunately, there was one race that I was really disappointed about, and it was the week right after this had happened. And I was competing against Alberto Salazar. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but
Sure.
He set the marathon record, world record in 1982. But he was also a junior at the time, and I ran against him in the 2 mile, which is not my event. But anyway, I thought I could be as competitive with him. And unfortunately, he got me in that race. But other than that, I was undefeated in the mile that year. Went to my senior year. I had so much, I was so excited about my senior year coming up and everything. And unfortunately, I got injured going into my senior year. And so I was really, I had an Achilles tendon issue, and I wasn't even sure whether I was going to be able to run again. And that was devastating to me, because I was hoping to get out of Brooklyn, get out of my home situation, and go to college and you know, have aspirations of Olympics and so forth and so on. So, but I got to my senior year. As you mentioned, I set the national record for the 2 mile. I got myself together. I was able to get myself in some good shape. And then we won the Penn Relays too, which is another unbelievable time. We weren't, I'll tell you a story about the Penn Relays. The week prior to the Penn Relays, I ran horribly. Louis Astolazaga, who went to Laughlin, he was my nemesis at the time. And he had run an unbelievable race in the week prior, the Penn Relays. And in fact, several weeks prior to the Penn Relays, I had been not running well, and he was running really good. And he had run a really good race the week before at the Queenside, I think it's the Queenside Island Relays. And so the day after that race, I got up in the morning, and this goes back to what Sully was telling you about. I got up in the morning, and I ran an 8-mile race. 8 miles, excuse me. Well, it was like a race, but I ran an 8-mile workout. I ran so hard that by the time I got home, I slept the whole day. So I was totally exhausted after that race. I mean, after that workout. It was a race. It felt like a race. So that whole week, I kept on saying to myself, and I'm not even sure if I told anybody this, but I said to myself, I don't care where I get the stick in Penn, I can get it in last place. We're not going to lose. And that's what I said going into Penn Relays. And you had Louis was running anchor. I was running anchor on the relay. Anyway, to make a long story short, Al Ferrantino, who was our unbelievable half miler, and he's passed away. He passed away about 12 years ago. And but an unbelievable kid, and he ran his ass off. Excuse my French, if anybody doesn't mind. But he ran his ass off, and he brought us right to in contention. And so I got the stick around 3rd place, and Louis got the stick right with me. And that race was a barn burner. I mean, it was. We both of us ran basically neck and neck the whole entire time, and then when it came down to the last straightaway, I just basically said it's done. We're not gonna lose, and we didn't. And so we ended up winning by 10 yards. That was the first time they ever went to metric. So technically, it still stands as a national record because they never ran it again. And so we still hold the national record for the metric version of the distance medley relay, that was just unbelievable. But really the credit goes to Al because he ran crazy. He ran his butt off. My time was equivalent to about a 4:08 mile, and anyways, that was another highlight. But I do want to mention one more highlight that as far as racing is concerned. Again, it has to do with relays. It has nothing to do with my own individual accomplishments. It was the 4-mile relay. In my sophomore year, Brian Johnston, myself, Jerry Senchowitz, Matt's brother, and Art Stober were the fastest 4-mile relay team in the United States of America. And we were the fastest 4-mile relay team by 10 seconds. And so I take great pride in that because that was unheard of at that time. You had two of us were under 4:20 for the mile. Jerry Senchowitz ran 4:21 and Artie ran 4:25. And so that, again, that cohesiveness, that brotherhood is what I so much love and appreciate about Power, and Brother Beelan being a part of that whole thing, keeping me together, inspiring myself. And I know I wasn't the only one. As I learned over the years, I wasn't the only one that he had been a father figure as well as a mentor to. There were a lot of kids like myself that were going through very difficult times in their family life or in their personal life. And Brother Beelan was the true north of a lot of us kids. And he passed away in 1992. But even to this day, Matt and I always will make, when we see each other and we get talking about stuff, one of our comments we will always say is, what would Brother Beelan do? That would be our saying to each other if we were talking about something difficult in our lives. And what would Brother Beelan do? And what would Beelan do is what we would say. So as far as people who are important in my life, all the brotherhood of Power runners and other students, Rick Martin being one of them, all these people are like brothers to me because they were there to give me a sense of community, give me a sense of belonging. And of course, Brother Beelan gave me that sense of that I could accomplish anything that I could put my mind to, and that he always made me feel like he knew who I was as a human being, and he always invested in that.
Okay. You go to Eastern Michigan, you study social work. Despite injuries, you're a two-time All-American. You get sponsored by Nike, and then just give us all of that up till you stop running because of those injuries.
Yeah, when I got out of high school, I went to Eastern Michigan University. I was injured most of the time. I didn't have a really good. It was totally different. Going from Beelan's way of coaching, which was more about empowerment, to a guy who just wanted to win the MAC championships and wasn't concerned about me as a human being, was like night and day. So, and then I was injured a lot, but I was able to make All-American a couple times, and I'm really proud of one thing, that as I made it to the nationals every year except for 1 year that I was injured. But I made nationals every year, and so, but one great thing about that is that I was able to pursue social work and pursue that, and that was Brother Beelan was the reason why I went into that field, because I saw what he did for my life, and I wanted to pass that on to other people, and so that's why I ended up in social work. So, but I was really I got out of school, and of course had ambitions of going to the Olympics and all that stuff, and then I got injured again. I was right on the cusp of running really. I was in 1985. I was running really good, had some good indoor races. Was on my way of really kind of breaking lower down the barrier of the 4-minute barrier, and then I pulled a hamstring, and then shortly after that I ruptured my Achilles tendon. So then I had a couple of surgeries, and I tried to come back again, but that didn't seem to work out. But however, I moved to Maryland. I'm sorry, I moved to Washington D.C. in late '80s, and Matt actually happened to be living in Beltsville, and I was kind of like at a crossroads in my life, and I wasn't sure what I was going to be doing with my life, and I was managing some retail stores down in D.C., and I was just kind of a little bit trying to find myself, and the running aspect of my life was kind of like in flux because of my injuries and everything and my surgery. So, but somehow Matt got a hold of me, and he asked me to come over to his place, and we had been in touch periodically throughout the years, not very much. I would see him like at the nationals or whatever, and from time to time, but other than that, we hadn't really had much contact. So he asked me to come over and spend some time with him, and let me stay over at his house. I don't know if Matt remembers this, if he's still on, but he had just had Lauren. Lauren was his first child, and Beverly and him and Lauren. And he had me coming over to stay over with him, and we went on some runs, and he would just talk to me about stuff. And I was so appreciative of him taking the time just to be there for me. And from that time, our relationship just kind of just grew even more stronger. And like I said, I was saying earlier how I love Matt. I love Matt in so many ways because of the person that he is. Obviously, he's an extraordinary athlete, but that's just a small part of who Matt is. And you may not ever know this, but he's a really deep guy, and I love him to pieces because he's just one of those original, um, salt of the earth original articles, and so, but yes, so that's how actually um, Matt and I really came closer with each other after me being down here and him really just reaching out to me and kind of taking me under his wing. And I'm so grateful for that because I was at a place where I wasn't sure where I was going in my life. And I'm sure Brother Beelan had uh, some part of that because he would always when I would every time I would call brother when I would call Brother Beelan, which wasn't often enough, and I feel so much regret about not reaching out to him more. But every time I would call him, even though it would be a year would go by, what he would always tell me is I would apologize for I should wish I had called you sooner or earlier or whatever. He would always say, "Look, I just want to know how you're doing. I just want to know you're okay. How are you okay?" So and that's kind of like the way Matt was too. Matt was just like, hey, just want to just check in to see how you're doing. Just keep a smile on your face, keep moving. Don't let things get you down. And of course, Matt has an unbelievable sense of humor, and he always, like he did tonight, he can get you laughing about nothing in particular, but about everything in what he's talking about. So I'm just really fortunate to have people like him and the Sullys of the world and Brian Johnston and Rick Martin and just so many people that have contributed to my experience. And all these people are from power. All these people are people who have that. And I don't know what it is, if it's the culture of power or if it's something that Brother Beeling kind of brought out of us. I don't know, or if maybe a combination of, as far as the relays are concerned, winning, and whether or not it was because we went to power that we were almost like programmed to want to win, or whether it was that we just had this brotherhood that kind of inspired that, or Brother Beeling just inspiring the best in us to, and not necessarily on the track, because Brother Beeling would always say, he would always take track and use it as an analogy to life. Like one of the great things he'd always say is, life has its hills and valleys. And so when we'd be having a rough time in a track or a rough time in our lives, he would always bring track and life together and make it seem like it was connected. So you can take lessons from a loss, or you can take lessons from a win even, and you can shape a situation that may happen in your life, a circumstance that may happen in your life, and apply it to an experience on the track. And I take how my business and how I've evolved in my business and how my business is done well, is as I take the same energy and the same concept that I have for my running, and I put that into my business. Anyway.
Well, no, tell us about, so eventually you went on to found Coach Mo Wellness,
Yes.
which I'm sure is what you're talking about, which has become a big part of your life, of course. So tell us a little bit about that as we get towards the end. But tell us about Coach Mo Wellness. What made you do it? What exactly is it? And it sounds like you're continuing it to this day.
Yeah. So it started. It's really interesting. I was training in 1996, and with I guess visions of grandeur of maybe trying to. I was actually turning 40. And I don't know what the hell I ever thought I could possibly do this, but I was thinking maybe I could possibly try to make an Olympic trials, and who knows. So I was training really hard. I was training with the Enclave, which is a postgraduate group of runners that actually Matt coached for a while down in DC. And they were all they were all runners from Georgetown and all the other schools. And so I was training with them for a little bit with the idea in the back of my head that possibly I can, maybe make an Olympic trials and maybe make an Olympic team. I don't know, but I was thinking that, and I was trying that, but it didn't work out. I ended up rupturing my Achilles tendon again, and that kind of ended that. So I was in a health club, and I was a fellow runner, a fellow national runner, got this article about depression and athletes. And she handed this to me. And she said, I think you're depressed. And she handed this article to me, and it was talking about depression in athletes and everything. And I wasn't training, I wasn't working out or anything. And so I read the article, and I said, oh, whatever. Anyway, to make a long story short, I started taking a spinning class. And so I took the spinning class, and I got so wrapped up into it that I started going to different clubs and different locations and taking the class. Finally, somebody said, you should teach the class. And I said, you know what, you're right, I should teach the class. Now, in my wildest dreams, I never thought of myself as a coach, never thought of myself as doing anything like that. So I started teaching these spinning classes. And so all of a sudden, these people started coming to my class because I started incorporating running themes into the spinning classes. And so we'd have relay races on the bike. So I'd have two people standing next to each other and giving each other a high five. One person would go, and then they'd high five each other, and then the next person would go, and I'd have half the classes. And so it was crazy. So I have all these people lining up for my classes. It just kind of blew up. And then people knew that I was a competitive runner. And so somebody asked me, would I train for a triathlon? And so I said, okay, great. So I trained that person for a triathlon. And then before you know it, people were asking me to train them for a marathon. And then within 2 years, I was training 50 people for a marathon.
Wow.
So it just kind of blew up. But the beauty of it was, it wasn't just about, I could set up, make programs and, design different workouts and all that stuff. That was not the problem. What I wanted to do is I wanted to see how I can get into the individual and have them use, like Track did for me, how they can use it and apply it to their lives. So somebody who is maybe turning 40 or just got divorced, and they wanted to maybe feel better about themselves, I would try to infuse positive anecdotes and quotes and whatever in their workouts. And I would have people being highlighted, and these were people who were in their 50s and 40s, but I would give them, like, I would promote somebody. I would write a little bio about the individual, saying how great they did that week. And it was amazing, the camaraderie that came with these people doing these workouts together. And then we would have these big like Last Supper meals, and it just became bigger than just the running. And I loved that aspect of it, because it was about really touching people's lives in a deeper way, just like I was when I was doing the social work. And so, and it just grew. And then before you knew it, I started training people individually. And now that's what I do full time. I don't do the groups anymore, but I do pretty much individual. I go to people's homes or I Zoom with people. And it's just so rewarding to not just help them achieve a physical goal, but to see how they can maximize their individual power and individual sense of worth. And that, to me, that's the most rewarding part of what I do, is the personal relationships that I build, and how that not transforms, but how that motivates them to feeling better about themselves, or applying it to their lives in some capacity. And so, but with all that said, one of the things about the aspect of the brotherhood component of power and how it's affected me so much is I wrote a screenplay, and I wrote a screenplay really after Brother Beelan passed away in 1992. I wanted people to know about who this man was and how he impacted so many people's lives. And so I spent many years piddling around with it. And I finally finished the screenplay back in 2013, I think it was. I finally finished it, and a full feature film. And I shopped it around a little bit. But basically the story was about how Brother Beelan affected my life primarily. And then I shopped it around, and some other people's lives too, but how I shopped it around, and I got a few bites, and some people looked at it, some people in Hollywood looked at it, and they said it was a made-for-TV movie. It was kind of nice, but it wasn't really quite, a full feature. I'm sorry, it wasn't quite a blockbuster kind of a scenario. So I wasn't getting the kind of bites that I wanted. And so over the past few years, I would say over the past couple of years, I've been revising my script, and I've been interviewing a lot of people actually, as it would turn out, and drafting a little more another narrative in the story that really deals with again the brotherhood component and dealing with more of these other narratives. There are other narratives in the story now that are phenomenal. And some of the people actually that I think are listening in are some people I've actually talked with, and I'm incorporating those other aspects into the story, and it is it's gonna it's just coming along so well, and I'm just so excited about the finished product when I have finished my revisions, because it's going to really show a lot of different other angles of other people's lives and how Brother Beelan had such an impact on their lives. And also too, it's going to really show him in so much more of a more of a nuanced way. And so I'm really excited about finishing that and then getting it out, and then hopefully coming to a theater nearest you when we can go back to a theater again. But this is a story that I really feel so passionate about, because Brother Beelan was one of these individuals that comes once in a lifetime, if ever. He just was that kind of a person.
This has been fabulous, Maurice.
I'm sorry I was so winded. I'm sorry about that.
No. You've got a great life story. I'm glad we got to hear it.
So I don't know if you all could see me. I hope you can't. But I have my uncles. So I'm Karen Riley. I am Brother John Beelan's niece. I have my mom here, who is Barbara Riley, and that is my Uncle John's sister. And what I want to say to all of you is that my uncle was so incredibly humble. And what he would really do at this moment, which is, this has been such a phenomenal moment for my mom and I, but my uncle was so humble. And what he would really do is put the mirror back on all of you, whether or not you were able to benefit from my uncle's face-to-face influence, or whether you benefited from somebody else sharing with you. But he would put the mirror back on you, and he would take absolutely no credit for your successes, for what all of you have done, the alumni of Power and the runners, and what you all accomplished, and more importantly, what your footprint has been on this earth. And I think that's an important thing to my uncle. And all of you, just as the stone gets thrown into the pond and the ripple kind of moves out. And while he may have thrown that first ripple in, all of you as Power Memorial alum have continued to honor the integrity, the closeness, the morals and the values, I think, of what all of you have brought. And for that, I applaud you all. Today, for any Marine, any of you that have been Marines or served our country in that capacity, today is the Marine Corps birthday, 245 years. And when I listen to you talk, Maurice, and I listen to all of you throughout the years, you guys embody truly a Power Memorial as runners, what you guys have accomplished in your own lives. Really, I equate it to my father as a Marine of 30 years, my brother 30 years. I've served my country as a civilian of 30 years. But we so proudly want to talk about brotherhood and what all that means, whether that's in war or whatever. But you all, I mean, I can't tell you, my mom and I have sat here and cried through what Maurice said, and what all of you have accomplished in your life is such a true testament to not only my uncle, but to each and every one of you that are Power Memorial alum, because you are unique, you're different, and proudly wear that. So I've gone on, but thank you. And Maurice, I love you so much. And